Hi guys, thank you so much for being here. So today I'm going to make a video called Was Michelangelo Creative? A couple of weeks ago, I posted a video on perfectionism and creativity and why perfectionism is the opposite of creativity. And I got a comment that stated something to the effect that Michelangelo was a perfectionist and was he not a creative person? And it was a really interesting question and it gave me food for thought. And on the surface of it, it would seem that me even asking that question, was Michelangelo a creative person? It seems like bonkers. Like, oh my God, like how could I even pose that question? Of course he was creative. Look at all the brilliant works of art that he did. However, let's look at this a little more closely. During the 15th century, this was in Italy. Now, at that time, Italy was not known as the country of Italy as it is today. Italy was a variety of regions that were controlled by different forces, but there were still similarities within the region, namely that the church controlled so much of society. And I would even go so far as to say that the church was higher than the emperor in terms of power, because there was no separation between the church and state at that time and for the longest time thereafter. So whatever the church decreed was kind of law. It would hold up in any branch of the government at the time. So let's talk about Michelangelo specifically. He actually was a sculptor first and foremost, and he did not consider himself a painter at all. He did not like painting. He wanted to sculpt whatever he wanted to sculpt. However, the Pope at the time commissioned him to paint the Sistine Chapel. Michelangelo refused. Now, can you imagine present day how much power the Pope has? This is present day. So in the 15th century, if you can try to imagine the power that the Pope held. So for Michelangelo to refuse the Pope, he must have really absolutely not wanted to paint the Sistine Chapel. Not only that, but it required tremendous courage for him to say no to the Pope. Well, the Pope wasn't having it, so the Pope got the emperor at the time involved, and the emperor ordered Michelangelo to do the Sistine Chapel. Michelangelo absolutely was devastated. He did not want to do the Sistine Chapel, but now the emperor had ordered him to do it, so there was no way that he could say no. Like, there was nothing he could do. If he had refused the emperor, I'm not sure what would have happened to him. Like, maybe he would have been imprisoned or taken to the Colosseum where they would have, tore him apart. Like, I have no idea what would have happened to him. He just did not have that choice. So he was forced into painting the Sistine Chapel. And he had to work for 4 years, 7 days a week, for 18 hours a day, reportedly. That's what he had to work to paint the Sistine Chapel. And he was so angry about it for the rest of his days. Like, he never got over it. It ruined his eyesight, his back, his neck, his legs. I mean, every part of his body. And he was bitter and angry about it till the end. He never stopped talking about it. He never stopped complaining about it. And he did not want to paint the Sistine Chapel. Now, the Pope wanted the Sistine Chapel painted, all the amazing frescoes that you see on the ceiling. He wanted that done simply to puff up his own ego. That is what it boiled down to. He wanted to show everybody in the region how rich the church was, and the chapel, the Sistine Chapel, belongs to the Pope. It is where the Pope goes to get all the important ceremonies done and what have you. So he wanted to show everybody in the region how rich, you know, the church was, and how he was just wanted to like one up everybody. And he was really in competition with his predecessor as well. So that was the reason why the Pope wanted to have the Sistine Chapel painted. It was not for any artistic reason or anything like that. And a lot of artists at the time, and even for centuries after, they did not have control over what kind of art that they did. They really didn't. They were commissioned. They, a lot of times, they were given blueprints about what to paint, what to draw, what to sculpt, and then they had to do it. They had to meet those um, requirements of what was asked upon them and forced upon them, really. So, Michelangelo, was he creative or not? My humble opinion is that he was not given the opportunity to be creative. Was he a master? Absolutely. Was he a genius? Absolutely. Was he skilled? Of course, without a doubt. He was probably one of the most skilled artists slash sculptors in the history of mankind. He was the first artist to actually study cadavers, so he could understand how the human body worked, and that's how he approached his art. He was skilled like a surgeon in what he did. So was he skilled? Absolutely. But was he creative? Well, he wasn't given the opportunity to be creative. Even the sculptures that he did, and he was, by his own declaration, he was a sculptor before anything else. That was his passion, that was his love, that was what he wanted to do. But even the sculptures that he did, they were commissioned, and there were very strict standards of what he could and could not do. So was he creative? I believe that he, of course, had the ability to be creative, but he just wasn't given the opportunity to be creative. And I think a lot of times there is some sort of confusion between creativity and skill, because after that comment was left on my last video about perfectionism is the opposite of creativity, I was talking to my daughter about it, and she's 15. She is a writer. She's been writing for a long time. She writes short stories and all sorts of things, and she's been doing this for years. So we had a very robust conversation, and my daughter, at first agreed with the person who left the comment, and she said, "Well, Mom, I'm a perfectionist, and I'm also creative." And so, we just kept on talking and talking. And as I got more and more into the conversation, as we got more further along the conversation, what I realized was that what she was calling perfectionism was actually skill. So maybe sometimes we might get skill confused with perfectionism, because you can be highly skilled and be creative, but I believe that if you are a perfectionist, it is the opposite of creativity. It does hinder creativity. It does kill off creativity, because perfectionism is, well, first of all, nobody is perfect. We are all human. So there is nobody that is perfect. Even Michelangelo, he might have strived for perfection, but he was not perfect. And so nobody is perfect. And what I was talking about more so was, if we allow perfectionism to hinder us, like, I am not going to start painting until I can draw like the masters, or I am not going to start a YouTube channel until I can speak on camera like Oprah Winfrey, or that's what I'm talking about. To aim for a level of perfectionism that is simply unattainable, because the only way we learn is by doing. I mean, even Oprah Winfrey didn't start off being Oprah Winfrey. She had to do and do and do and fail and fail and fail. And in the doing and in the failing, we get to perfect our craft, which doesn't mean that we're perfect, but it means that we get to be more perfect than we were, say, a month ago or a year ago. So I think a lot of times maybe skill gets confused with perfectionism. And this is a very, very interesting topic. Well, it's interesting to me. And I think it's interesting to a lot of people because even the great masters, like say in the 15th century, we're talking about Michelangelo, so let's go back to the 15th century. Even at that time, artists were really given a double-edged sword because on one hand they were expected to be really, really skilled, and they were expected to be, I don't know, perfect, but they were expected to have a level of perfection on one hand. But then on the other hand, because the church controlled everything and the church ruled over society and the arts and churches and education and all of that, the churches also said, well, only God is perfect. So even the greatest artist, they had to have some kind of imperfection to kind of show that they're human, because it would be considered like blasphemous to for an artist to even claim that they are perfect, because only God is perfect. So the church really was very rigid in all of these kind of expectations. So it's so interesting to have this conversation, and I'm sorry, but I'm just doing this talk. We're not really having a conversation, but maybe in the comments, like, people can, if you do hear this video and listen to it to the end, if maybe you could leave some comments, because it's really, really interesting to me, and I really appreciated that perspective about Michelangelo. And he was a perfectionist, and well, are you saying that he wasn't creative? Well, my honest opinion is that he just was not given the opportunity to be creative. He was so stifled within the box of tradition that he was caught in at that time, because of where he was born and when he was born, that it's just it's so sad. It's heartbreaking. When I looked at the frescoes in the Sistine Chapel, I cried, but it was for a different reason than maybe what most people would cry about, because I know the backstory about how it ruined this man, it ruined this artist, this creative spirit. It just ruined him for the rest of his life. It just tore him up. His body, his eyes, his creativity. He just was so angry and bitter about it, and it was just so heartbreaking to me. And when I saw Pieta, the just such a beautiful, beautiful sculpture, I cried also. And I'm getting emotional talking about it right now, but that was where his love was. That was where his creativity was. Um, and when you stand in front of Pieta, you see the genius of this man, but his hands were tied by the church and the constraints that were placed upon him. And even present day, I have read art critics and historians who talk about Michelangelo, and they talk about him in the sense of, well, thank God the Pope and the Emperor forced him to paint the frescoes, because it's the greatest piece of art that we have ever seen, and all the people who have been able to see it for generations thereafter. And to me, that's just such a myopic, selfish way of looking at it, because here is this man, Michelangelo, whose life was ruined because he was forced to do this Sistine Chapel for 4 years nonstop. And to say, well, I'm glad he was forced to do it, just so we could look at it and just so we could appreciate it. I don't know, that just, it doesn't sit right with me for this man, and what he paid the price. We didn't pay the price. He paid the price with his body and with his creativity, with his mind, with his soul. And so to me, I just think that he wasn't given the opportunity to be creative. But I would really appreciate everybody's thoughts on this matter. And of course, it's, the whole thing is so subjective. Creativity, well, creativity is subjective. Perfectionism, that's subjective. So all of these things are so subjective. So this is just my opinion and my take. And anyways, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you later. Bye.